I am Allen Saakyan, and I'm currently sitting with the infamous Nick Hamas. Woo! Yeah. Nick is awesome. Definitely one of my best friends. Such an awesome guy. He's got an epic background. Linguistics, philosophy, computer science, Google, robotics. He's all over the place. He's crushing it, and we have really great conversation because we're both these self-proclaimed polymaths, and we're aiming to have a conversation about nuance in politics today.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
This is going to be a good one. So we'll just jump right into it. And the first thing we want to talk about is the importance of free thinking. And you know me, I went from being the president of the Teenage Republicans Club in my high school to being very, very liberal in San Francisco, and I have now found myself being a moderate, like just right in the middle, free thinking, and I found it to be a great way to be able to talk to people on both sides of the political spectrum and kind of grab ideas from both sides. What do you think about that and the importance of free thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that, like, free thinking is a value that I think more people should have, whether they happen to find themselves on the left, on the right, somewhere in the middle, somewhere, anywhere on the, like, libertarian to authoritarian spectrum, that, like, people don't see a label and say, I must believe everything that it says, because while maybe not every possible political persuasion has valid points, I think at minimum there's something to learn from all of them, and they do all have valid places.
Yes, and that's the key, that there is something to learn from all of these different perspectives. How did the person finally come to this perspective that they have? What was their life journey that brought them to this point? And the only way to really be able to understand that is by actually asking them deep questions and caring about them and where they came from and how they feel the way they do. And so a really fun thing that we were just talking about with June Yoon last night on Simulation was the idea of, if you find yourself frequently talking to one demographic of people, just have some fun. Go to the other demographic of people and just stay open-minded and just ask questions. And
learn. I mean, there are so many different people who have lived through, like, drastically different governments, drastically different, like, sorts of political systems, especially, like, people who lived through the former Soviet Union. Like, they have different perspectives because their life experience is so different. And whether or not you, like, totally agree with that, like, there's a lot to learn from them.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember having conversations with my mom and uncle about what some of the nuances were in Soviet Union, and there were actually some things that they were like, no, really bad. And there were like some things like, hey, like some of the programs were actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
I mean,
helping mothers nurture kids.
Oh, yeah.
All this kind of stuff.
I mean, I think, and one of the things Jun Yoon was talking about last night was like that you have capitalism and you have socialism as sort of extreme opposites. And at their extremes, they both have, like, serious flaws. Mm-hmm. Like, if you have pure capitalism, you don't have fire departments. Mm-hmm. That's technically a socialist idea.
Who's going to provide private fire stations and police stations and roads? Who's going to privately build roads and highways? Yeah,
nobody. And, like, at the other extreme end, you have socialism, and there's, like, no incentive to innovate. Yeah. And, like, somewhere in the middle is the happy spot.
And that's why we have these nuanced political conversations, to find some of the good stuff in socialism and capitalism, maybe innovate with some new ideas that haven't been discussed in either one of them, and get to this sort of future that we want to build.
Exactly.
Yes. So we also want to talk about a little bit of, like, this idea of being okay with not knowing an answer to something, and kind of the importance of being humble with saying, I don't know, but I'm going to go do research so I can try and get to an answer.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, I think one of the tough things, because I think it's such an important concept in the sciences, where you say, until you have proven something, you don't know it. But, like, in politics and economics and some of these, like, broader social sciences, like, there's not many laboratories. I can smash atoms and get hundreds of thousands of data points. Trying to get hundreds of thousands of data points on tax policy is fool's errand.
Yes.
It's not going to happen.
Yes. Well, we can't. It's very difficult to, and when we do, it will make our analysis so much better.
Oh, certainly. But it's going to take orders of magnitude longer.
Yes, yes. it's so much more subjective than science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you also get into more like ethical quandaries.
Yes.
When you're trying to do something, it's really important to get it right because it affects so many people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that you have to make decisions with partial information and say, maybe I don't know what the best answer is, but from the limited set of information I have, here are some of the ideas, here's some of the interpretations of that data, and here's some of the ways that we can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's why we believe we should do it this way.
Yep.
And I think there's, especially with such limited data, several valid perspectives on most like approaches to things.
So let's jump into our next topic, and well, the same topic, political nuance, but we're actually going to give examples now.
Yeah.
And so here's a really good example that I was just talking to Nick about a little bit that I think is a really good way to understand what we're talking about. So let's take immigration, for example. If we take a binary understanding of where we stand on immigration, I'm either for immigration or against immigration, and that's the end of the conversation, we're going to miss out on all of the really interesting nuance that when you're able to actually have a discussion with someone around, oh, well, how do you think about this point about it or that point?
Yeah.
And so one of the examples that we were talking about is maybe potentially not being so in favor of H-1B visas in a way that they tie the employer to the corporation, or maybe not wanting to deport people that are here illegally and not wanting to spend our resources on that, or maybe not wanting to allow in refugees that have backgrounds that are a little bit sketchy. We need to do better background analysis, but still bring people in because of humanity. So that kind of nuance, that's like 3 sub-points around immigration, that will get us to much better conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. This is another great example where both extremes are actually pretty terrible. Like if you let, if you let literally anybody into the country, I think you can obviously imagine like why that might fail. And you might like not have stable population, you might lose a lot of things. If you let literally nobody in, the US has a below replacement rate birth rate.
Yes.
Which means eventually your population is going to do this.
And human capital is super important moving forward. And we want to bring innovators from around the world to the US.
Exactly.
We have so many other ones here. Let's keep going.
And I mean, I think I would argue, like, getting more of those perspectives, like, you want to build apps that affect 1 billion people. You can't just target Americans.
Yes.
Because there's not 1 billion of us.
Them. Yep.
Like, you get somebody who grew up in India, you get somebody who grew up in China, and they actually they can help you build that broader perspective and realize, oh, if we do this, low bandwidth environments are going to have a terrible experience and they won't use it.
And there's things like in India, if you talk to someone, you'll learn about Paytm. And if you talk to someone in China, you might learn more about Alibaba. And you might really get a more well-rounded perspective about maybe mobile payments as well as commerce and distribution of goods. And boom, all of a sudden you become better well-known to of how 3 billion other people, that's an order of magnitude more than the US.
Oh yeah.
Boom. Yeah. Just like that. So this is really important. So let's give another example of, let's talk about taxes.
Yep.
So we can talk a lot about giving corporations less taxes so that they can potentially provide more to our economy, more jobs, more innovation, etc. And we can also talk about the importance of providing social programs for people that are physically or mentally unable to do so for themselves, and have a really kind of strict way of understanding who's like taking advantage of the system or not. Yeah. So again, we're talking about multiple levels of nuance in taxes, not just for high taxes or for low taxes. So again, why is this so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think like taxes are... So often when you talk to people about taxes, you really get like at the heart about what they believe government is supposed to be.
Yes.
Like you have on sort of the very libertarian end, you have, I think Penn Jillette is the person I most associate with this idea, but like if you would not use a gun to accomplish a mission, to accomplish a goal, you should not do it with tax money.
Mm.
A very limited, narrow view of what government should do.
Give me an example of that, quick.
So like for example, I mean, like eminent domain, or like providing healthcare for people. If you wouldn't use a gun to provide healthcare, you shouldn't use tax money. Would be a like fairly strong libertarian view on that.
Use a gun to provide healthcare.
So the idea is that the government has a monopoly on violence. If you don't pay your taxes, what happens to you?
Oh, okay.
Somebody with a gun comes and takes away your freedom. So in some sense, so goes the argument. If you would not do something with a gun and detain someone for not doing it, you shouldn't do it with tax money.
So, for example, I want police and fire trucks and roads, so that's an important thing to include in taxes. But maybe healthcare is not so much?
Yeah, I don't... I think different people draw that line in different places.
Okay.
But, like, certainly it's about the monopoly on violence.
Okay. And then we were researching the Laffer Curve, which we thought was really interesting to share with everyone. The idea that at some point along this curve, and we don't know exactly if it looks like just a normal bell curve or how it's shaped, but there's some sweet spot in terms of the tax rate that we can have to foster massive amounts of innovation. And we were having a discussion. We think it's somewhere around maybe 30 to 50% would be an ideal sort of way to say, here's what we need for roads and police and stuff, and here's what we need for you to be able to innovate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cool idea. Like, in the US, so much of the dialogue is raise taxes, lower taxes.
Yeah.
But it's more complicated than that. Like, what is your net tax rate? If it's really low, lowering taxes is not a good idea. Your government's going to go into massive debt, which is some of the effect that we see happening right now. But if your tax rate's very high, you really shouldn't be raising them because you're going to start stifling innovation and decreasing that incentive to be successful.
Yep.
So you have this axis of, at some point, raising taxes keeps raising government revenue until it starts stifling innovation.
Exactly.
And that's where you get this curve.
Laffer Curve. L-A-F-F-E-R curve. Look it up, check it out, it's epic. Alright, and let's jump into the last sort of part of nuanced politics, which is this like open-mindedness. And so I like to use myself as the example here by explaining in a way that I talk about AI a lot. And I talk about AI from like a very 10,000 foot perspective looking downward on it. And Nick might come up to me one day and he might say something like, Alan, maybe you got this 10,000 foot view pretty good, but there's some nuance to your understanding of how AI works that is, you're not quite there yet. And here's some content for you to look up and research in order for you to become better understanding of it. And if you do that to me, usually people respond in one of two ways. The first way is something like, Nick, thanks for coming and telling me that. I really appreciate it. You're aiming to help make me better. And I'm going to take the content that you recommended and I'm going to go and research it this week and understand it better. And I'm going to email you at the end of the week with a kind of main points that I took away from it, and we'll have another discussion about it. And there's that view, and then there's the view of where I might take offense to what you said and be like, hey, you think I don't know about nuance and AI? And if I get, that stifles this really important conversation that should be happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, like, it's important to recognize these sort of limits and where this becomes a disanalogy, but like the idea of there's so much more than you commonly hear that's important detail to really understand what's going on in politics and economics and society. That, like, getting some of those ideas, and no matter where you go from there, like looking into them, reading about it, learning, and then sort of intellectually chewing on it is a valuable exercise for almost anybody.
And then sometimes people will come up to you and try and help you find more of this content so that you can intellectually chew on it and experientially chew on it a little more. But there's always the problem that, oh, that person didn't tell it to me in a way that was emotionally intelligent or representative of who I am and how I feel. But then the other person needs to challenge themselves to not be so soft and try and take a little bit of good critique into as wisdom, that they should go and, yeah, that person said it for a reason. I should go look it up more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to meet people in the middle. Like, there should be this good, like, edifying intent that you really want to help the person, and that you're not trying to, you know, make money from them or scare them or, like, motivate them to do something that you want. But that you're really trying to help them. But also that the other person is like, okay, so I know what they're trying to do. I know they're trying to, like, teach me about something. And actually, like, look into it.
Exactly. So we covered a bunch of topics in nuanced politics. And this is free thinking is so important, open-mindedness is so important, really thinking about how to not take a binary sort of perspective on issues, but love the nuance.
Yeah.
And ask people about the nuance more.
Yeah,
and
how to be like gentle and not like bring up that defensive wall.
Exactly. Practicing not bringing up the defensive wall. So important. We're going to have much more of these conversations with Nick. Nick's a great mind to play intellectual tennis with. I love you so much. Thank you for having this conversation. We'll do it again very soon.
Cheers, Alan.
I love it.